We are continuing to follow the reaction for President Trump's State of the Union address last night. The president called for unity while discussing a wide-ranging list of policy matters, including immigration, abortion, and national security.
It all comes as another government shutdown looms less than 10 days away, unless lawmakers are able to come to an agreement on border security funding. So let's get straight to CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright and CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Good to see you both.
Yeah.
Good morning.
So it was interesting, Antjuan. We previewed the State of the Union speech yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about the idea that the president might call for some kind of unity. There were others who were saying he was going to be a little bit more aggressive. It seemed as if he tried to cram both into this speech. He in some instances called for unity when it comes to infrastructure and children with cancer, and in other ways he was extremely aggressive when talking about investigations, for example, and crime from immigrants.
I've been very consistent about what I thought about last night, both pre and post. What I know is leopards do not change their spots and zebras do not change their stripes. And the president used last night to go to his comfort zone, and that was the campaign trail. And that's the thing, we saw campaigner-in-chief Donald Trump just in a different setting. What struck me as odd is the very beginning, there's a protocol in which the speaker introduces the president. That did not happen last night. He went straight to his speech. So that kind of set the tone for me very early. And then he went into typical Donald Trump, what I call right-wing red meat rhetoric, really speaking to his base. And he went to what was familiar with him, and I think that was consistent throughout the speech. But as I said yesterday when we were on, I'm not convinced about what he says. I'm convinced about what he does after last night. And so this is the big test, what happens next.
So, Leslie, during the speech, though, the president did mention unity, did talk about, partisan divisions. I mean, he sort of said it, but we didn't sort of hear his plan of action to solve it. Sure. Did the Republicans feel like it was a speech that outlined a desire for unity?
Absolutely. Republicans have been extremely positive. And it's interesting, even soft Republicans who have been very disgruntled with the president's approach, his unconventional style. Really, I can't tell you how many messages I got of like, why doesn't that speechwriter write his tweets? I hadn't quite thought of it that way.
Really
and I, as someone who writes speeches, I don't know that I would have thought that either. But what really kind of comes out of this is very much what Antjuan was saying. It was a speech from the bully pulpit, right? He doesn't have that criticism, but it has a lot of meta points. And by that, I mean centrality. There were specific campaign code words that were used: crisis on the border, blue collar. We are the state of the country is strong. Mm-hmm. That kind of that ultimate message, and we are not a socialist country. These were very strong themes that resonate not only with men within the Republican Party, but also among Hispanics. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, when you use that's very strong, like strong America, strong military, strong presence, booming economy, it scores off the charts in terms of that.
I will say that when the president mentioned that this will never be a socialist country, Nancy Pelosi stood up and clapped.
Yeah, you had a lot of Democrats because somehow or another the media, the right-wing media, has painted this narrative that Democrats want this socialist agenda, and that's not true. But let me tell you what this speech did do. I call it the Trump teaser speech, and my dear friend is right. He said all the buzzwords to unite the Republican Party, because what last night was a united Democratic front on all regards, both House and the Senate, but there were fractions. There's a fractured Republican Party, and so I think he was speaking to his base. But a State of the Union speech is typically supposed to be a speech that brings all Americans together. He should have been speaking as the president of the United States, not the president of the Republican Party. And that was part of what I saw last night.
I disagree. I think he had a lot of very complimentary things when he was talking about the number of women that were elected, and they both.
There's a certain amount of irony in that, though.
I don't think he had something to do with it. A lot of women got elected because of Donald Trump.
That thought cloud didn't include Democrats in that.
Exactly.
However, it's still the fact you have all these women elected, and that was a very broad, kind of concession. I don't think the Democrats give him a lot of concession. Independents do, though, which is, I think, the important part. They want to see the economies moving. They're not going to give high marks to Congress anyway. They have both on the Republican and Democratic side. They're consistently very low. And the president can be low, too, but he's moving that agenda. And the legislative things, that's a criticism we give to every president at State of the Union. But that really gets marshaled out in Congress, the legislative, between the White House kind of legislative team and Congress.
But it was interesting to hear the Democrat response, the rebuttal yesterday, where Stacey Abrams, I thought what was striking striking about her speech was when she said she may disagree with the president on some policies, but she doesn't want him to fail. And that's the way it feels sometimes, as if the right, especially, not necessarily the Republicans, but the right of center Republicans seem to paint Democrats as wanting the president to fail at his job as somehow being, that's almost un-American.
Well, that's by design. That's called a public relations effort. But at the end of the day, it's what I said yesterday. Stacey Abrams is the new face of the Democratic Party. She speaks for the party, hence that's why she was chosen. And everything she said in 5 minutes was the issues that most of Americans, above 50% in every poll I've seen, agree with, whether it's immigration, whether it's education, whether it's voting rights. More than half of the country, Democrat or Republican, agree on those issues, and she laid it out plain and simple, and she laid it out with emotion, and she laid her qualifications out why she should be the person giving that message.
She did an excellent speech. I mean, she really did, and kudos for being able to, to break that curse of somebody who's been able to deliver that. I tell you that it lauded her. She was outstanding.
We have a little bit of that sound.
Oh,
let's play a little bit of Stacey Abrams giving that Democratic rebuttal.
We had to negotiate criminal justice reform or transportation or foster care improvements. The leaders of our state didn't shut down. We came together and we kept our word. It should be no different in our nation's capital.
Yeah, we had to negotiate criminal justice reform because 1994, under the Crime Act, under Bill Clinton, there's still a lot of bad blood in there in terms of mandatory sentencing, of which the president is trying to roll that back. So I think you see unusual bedfellows when it comes to certain types of issues like that. So that's a very good thing. I think she was magnanimous in the same way that we saw what centrist both Republicans and Democrats like to be, kind of give credit to each side. But because we're in such a polarized area, but on the polarized side, you did not see the progressive left, even though you did have their own individual response, giving the response for the Democratic ticket. That's what the president's talking about. This is still a right of center country, which is why she was a perfect spokesperson for that, trying to peel away at some of that base. But you didn't have, he's saying that because the Democratic Party is in flux right now, being pulled excessively to the left with bigger government policies. You know they are.
Let me ask you a question, Leslie. As a Republican, though, so we're listening to the speech, and a lot of people suggested that it kind of sounded a little bit like, a campaign speech with a lot of the same stuff that we heard in the last campaign. Does that concern you, that if he's sort of teeing things up for what his campaign is going to look like moving forward, and not much has changed?
Means he thinks he can win with his base.
Yeah, but the midterm elections suggest otherwise.
Right. Okay, so you can look at it a couple different ways. Some Republicans will say, look, it's not that big an advantage, a majority the Democrats have. They feel when the president gets back on the ticket that they're going to take the House back again. This is an aggressive mano-a-mano strategy that's going on here. They feel the president is lining that up and that they're really thinking about it. And it's funny because we don't sit here and go, oh, the strategy behind, the president, because it's so off the cuff. But if you look at how he's laying out 2020, these meta messages that we know historically work, pulling that base back together, overwhelmingly, 3/4 of the, almost 77% in some polls, up in the 70s of Republicans support what the president was saying last night. He's uniting them, like we talked about, and he's painting the Democrats that they're leaning too far to the progressive left. So when you're going back to that battleground area, those blue-collar states, it's lining up. It's hard to see the long lens of time, but this is where he's going.
Except I don't call it the pull to the left. I think our party is going through growing pains. And our tent is growing. And I think, but there's a reason why Stacey Abrams' message was more speaking to the hearts and minds of everyday people, Democrats, Republicans, and independent thinkers, because that was as what she did in the campaign. I think that's why she was chosen to do that. Last night was an immigration speech for the president. But you saw the Democratic response. We want compassion at the border.
It's very personal.
But that does not mean we want open borders. To really mute the point that Republicans are trying to push, that Democrats want open borders, when really the theory, in my opinion, is if you're brown, you have to turn around. And that's what kind of Republicans think. But her tone was very soft. It wasn't this left-wing crazy agenda trying to pull the party, over on Pluto. It was in the middle of the road that middle of Americans want. And I think that is where the Democratic Party is as a whole.
All right, fascinating discussion. Leslie, always great to see you. Antjuan, my friend, thank you very much.
So we're going to take a quick